certain games sometimes, but Sinto is not afraid to express whatever he's thinking.
Well, I'm sure what he's thinking in this match is that he has a bit of an advantage over Fr0zen. Fr0zen's version of Jade Druid, we talked about a little bit, is this Violet Teacher version. And his deck is pretty strong. We see a little bit of smile from Fr0zen there, a little wave from Sintolol. He knows what this means. Coin Wild Growth means it's being followed up by Jade Blossom, and it's being followed up by a lot of action. Sinto's version of this deck has Jade Spirit, where Fr0zen has Violet Teacher, the Oaken Summons package, which is stronger against aggressive decks, but Sintolol's deck is stronger against other control decks. Yeah. And that's why Fr0zen, when he learned he was playing Sintolol, was very much unhappy, because this is a very tough matchup on all fronts for him.
Yeah, I thought this was kind of a tavern brawl, right? Where you start off at like 10 mana.
Yeah, the Jade Druid Mirror is basically a tavern brawl.
All right, so now this kind of is the first turn that Sinto is going to sit back and evaluate, because he has multiple options. Obviously, Jade Behemoth was looking really good, but Nourished and Arcane Tyrant also continues his development. And I'm like looking at the double ultimate infestation with the ramp, and Sinto knows what's coming next.
Yep, he is going big, but well, there is an infestation available for Sintolol, so he can do the same thing. He can nourish and play out his Fandral if he wishes.
Right, I really was joking, I promise, about the start the game at 10 mana, and it really is going to come down to that. The board state is relatively even, and Sinto does have, of course, the slight edge here, but Fr0zen will get the initiative with the ultimate infestation.
It's true. Though Sinto has the initiative in terms of Jade development so far. His Jades are a little bit bigger, already 4/4, whereas Fr0zen's next will be 3/3. There is the option for Sinto to nourish into Arcane Tyrant and Fandral, and that's what he's going to do. Yeah, take out this Violet Teacher.
Both players kind of laugh, even though the stakes are super high right now.
Yeah, this is a game. The winner of this game, or this match rather, is guaranteed $100,000, whereas the loser receives $50,000. They're playing for $50,000 and just kind of laughing and emoting back and forth.
This is getting a little silly at this point, quite frankly.
And the crowd loves it.
This is like theoretical Hearthstone. If we're like, okay, let's play a Jade.
Yeah, well, then I draw
brain.
this. And yeah, well, then I'd do this.
This trade does have implications for spreading play. And of course, even sets up a swipe.
Behemoth into swipe here does leave Fr0zen a little bit of board initiative at least. Though one of the big cards Sinto just drew, as I get ahead of myself, is that Medivh. Medivh is one of the differences in his Jade Druid deck compared to many of the others in the field, and it makes it have more power in these slower control matchups like the Jade Druid Mirror. So Sinto's deck basically is, on all angles, stronger in the mirror match than Fr0zen's, because it has more Jades, it has Medivh, it has just far more tools to give him those big options. And Fr0zen, this Violet Teacher can let him go wide, but when you go wide against another Jade Druid, you are just setting yourself up to potentially get ruined by spreading plague.
Well, he does have the branching paths.
True.
And his Jades are going to jump out ahead of his opponent. He also has Mark of the Lotus, too. Oh man, okay. I think he got everything off in time, but definitely cutting it close. Here's something that ends up being the case here. You know, I think Fr0zen summoned Jade Idol just for tempo. Oh, he held it back. Okay, at the last second. I was talking about like how in the Jade Druid mirrors, a lot of times you value the tempo so much that it's very rare, at least in the early stages of the game, to see Jade Idols shuffled into the deck because you really want to try and get your extra Jade power on the board to help tilt it to a victory.
Yes. Yeah, and this is an opportunity that Fr0zen has taken to recognize, okay, well, in the long game, Sinto has a big advantage, so I need to try to shorten the length of the game. I need to try to push here and not let Sinto take a turn and play Medivh. If Sinto gets to Medivh into Spreading Plague, that ends up being much more difficult for Fr0zen to overcome, whereas if he forces him to Spreading Plague here or take tons of damage, that is a much better situation.
Time waits for no one.
And I think that's maybe what Medivh is, or rather Sinto is debating. And he's actually going to go with Spreading Plague into branching paths of his own.
Wants to challenge it.
Yeah, by making the Scarabs 2 power, which I believe is what he will do, it makes, yes, the... oh, it's actually going with double buffs on this. Rather than any kind of arm. All right, well, these are some scary, scary Scarabs on Sinto's side of the board.
Right. The swipe does make clearing this a lot easier because of the branching path can give it plus attack as well.
It does, but at the same time, that means that Fr0zen is essentially using his turn to trade with Sintolol's board, essentially. He could.
But the Jade also develops a 6/6 too.
It's
I
true.
mean, it's not that bad for development actually when you look at the Violet Teacher's top tokens being spawned too.
He's casting another spell this turn. He should have cast the other spell
yeah.
first.
He should have cast the swipe so that he gets.
I think that Fr0zen just sort of had a realization that that was not the correct order if he's playing the swipe.
Time waits for no one.
And a little bit out of sequence, which does mean this student will be unbuffed.
That could make a huge difference.
It
the
could.
second Spreading Plague comes out here. Whether or not he actually kills the tokens. No swipe for Sinto on the other side.
And Fr0zen doing well, emptying his hand here for the second copy of Ultimate Infestation. And his Jades are actually bigger than Sintolol's at this point because Sinto has been taking these reactive turns.
And we'll have to do another reactive turn. The Death Knight does actually have the ability to remove one of the threats onto the board and still set up some walls to annoy Fr0zen's board as well.
Yeah, and crucially, because Fr0zen doesn't have the buff on that student, he is not able to just trade them into one of the Scarabs if he were to make Scarabs.
Right.
And
hero power.
Right.
Time waits for no one.
Another opportunity is, setting up Medivh, but it gets challenged immediately by the 7-2. That's so annoying.
Yeah, the front half of Medivh is not very impressive here. Sinto definitely running down to the end of the rope here.
Okay.
All right.
Letting the Violet Teacher live at this point. Wants to get walls in the way, realizing that there's so much damage potential.
Well, this could be...
I mean, Sinto also kind of is light baiting Fr0zen, his board, potentially into another Spreading Plague.
And that's got to be something that's on Fr0zen's mind. If he makes a bunch of 1/1 students with this teacher, another Spreading Plague could be disastrous.
I do have to kind of wonder, too, Fr0zen is doing something similar that we saw previously, where he's been very conservative with his Jada. Had an opportunity to develop it much earlier from tempo, chose not to.
Yeah, I think he would be going with Vandal Idol here after some trades.
Yeah. Which again, could have made a big difference. We'll see. But for now, Fr0zen's content with getting the best of both worlds. Drawing Vandal means that he gets to both shuffle and develop the 6/6, and his Jades are far ahead now of Sinto while pressuring his life total. This is very scary, and Sinto picks up Jade Idol. Not a good defensive card whatsoever.
And Fr0zen's one remaining card is an Infestation.
Right. I mean, Sinto's even just worried about potentially dying to another Marco Lotus
Right.
or Branching Pass. I mean, let alone the Ultimate Infestation.
Yeah, this wide board does represent a huge potential threat from either of those buff cards from Fr0zen. That's really how his version of Jade Druid is built to operate. It's built to make branching paths so much scarier.
Right. And that's the problem with the greed builds. If you're a little bit behind, then you don't get to set the initiative. And also why going first in a mirror can be so powerful, because you get that initiative. Even though Sintolol had double ram, so did Fr0zen. You got to set the pace. And the Vile Teacher stayed alive for so long.
Alright, well, going to go ahead and punch his way through, and the slime will take out the 7 power golem on the other side. But speaking of power, Ultimate Infestation number 2 is going to take out the golem and draw Fr0zen a whole new hand of cards.
Yeah, and Sintolol's going to have to rely on the Spreading Plague. I do wonder if Fr0zen maybe I want to even trade the 1/1 token in to the Scarab, but that's just going to be a concede. Fr0zen showing a lot of life this series with an important Jade Druid mirror that he was unfavored in.
And that is definitely a matchup that he